Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. How you guys doing tonight? We got a lot of news to go over tonight. Please share this out everywhere if you can. We got everything from the Supreme Court ruling to Thomas Clarence comments on two other rulings that should be overturned, or three. Biden saying a second pandemic. Questions about that on the cryptic message he put on Twitter. Monkeypox mutating at alarming rates. UK, of course, surging with COVID on the BA4 and BA5 variants. Doctors, of course, talking about the Juul ban and what effect it's going to have on teens. Copper is hitting the market and a bear market now, which is a bad sign. Europe is bracing for tough times. Of course, a lot of stuff happening. Bill Gates getting investigating. Attorney General intervenes after Bill Gates buys a massive amount of land. Supreme Court also allows carrying firearms in public in the majority of places. The Supreme Court, of course, knocking down that rule, while the U.S. Senate goes to pass more gun safety bills. U.S., of course, in Taiwan, and China saying Japanese ships are in the longest violation it's ever seen. Ukraine getting ruined and, of course, pulling back out of most major cities tonight. So we got a lot to go through, a lot to get started on here. Make sure you share this out with everyone in any group you can see out there. Definitely appreciate it. While you're joining us live, hello, Miss Debbie, Dave, Sandra, Lisa, Glenda, Tia, Gia, Corinne, Kevin, Linda, Lisa, Elaine, Bill, Matt, Karen, James, and Rodney. I just noticed there was two Rodneys in the group, so I'm sorry about that for not saying hi to everybody. But hopefully everybody is having a good day out there. Sad shape, world. It's a sad shape as America is getting ripped apart, and possibly for good. The great convergence that happened in the mid-20th century may have been an anomaly, legitimately, as we're watching what's happening now. It's time to stop talking about red and blue America. That's provoking collision. Longtime political strategists and labor unions are saying the same thing. Collaboration of progressive groups that study elections in a private newsletter writes that for small group activities, it's crazy. There's two blocks and a fundamental difference in the nation, uneasily sharing the same geographical space. And that's what's happening here in America. When you think about the United States, we make the essential error of imagining it being one single nation. It's a marble mixed with red and blue people. But in the truth, we've never been one nation, truly. More of a federation republic of two nations, blue nation and red. And it's not a metaphor. It's a geographic and historical reality, if you look at what's gone in the past and happening today. Of course, these groups are becoming more division between red and blue states, representing reven- revis- revisiting to the lines of separation through much of the nation's history. It's very similar to the geopolitical and cultural divides between the Union and the Confederacy. And this is not about slavery. This is just about the truth of what they practiced back then. I mean, the free states were uneasy about the alliance when becoming one nation, and so were the states that had slaves. This alliance has never been easy. But this movement, of course, has been hardened since then. Seeing what's happening, I mean, there's typically 25 red states and 17 blue, and 8 what we call purple states, where the government control has typically been divided. Voting population, of course, the red house, slightly more country's eligible voter population of 45% versus the 39% that the blue contributes now. So it'll be an interesting election coming forward, especially with all this stuff happening today as we go through this today. It's crazy because America is truly falling apart. Supreme Court, today overturned the Roe versus Wade decision officially. Supreme Court ending the recognition of the abortion rights given to individual states to power to limit and allowed, limit, and ban practices altogether are now be given to individual states, which is going to be a huge impact. Well, the ruling, does come with a lot of questions. A lot of Republican-led states asked the Supreme Court to strike down the lower courts to stop the 15-week abortion ban from taking place. This opinion, of course, changes everything in the country, and it truly takes constitutionalism back to its core. And that's one of the biggest things Clarence Thomas was talking about today when he, of course, called for overturning the constitutional rights that the court had afforded access to contraceptives and LGBTQ rights, and its opinion concurring with major decisions to overturn Roe versus Wade. Thomas acknowledged today that the decision like Dobbs versus Jackson, the women's rights organization, does not affect any rights besides abortion, but he argued that the constitutional due process clause does not secure the rights to an abortion or any other substantive right. And he urges the court to apply the same reasoning to other landmark cases. That's a big, big push. Seeing this coming forward is drastic. Hi, Rodney. I know the other Rodney's here. But, this is going to be drastic as further cases saying that the ones that he believe that should be reconsidered immediately are like Griswold and Lawrence and Olive Fall, of course. And these cases, they're landmark cases. And they all establish the constitutional right to stuff that shouldn't exist. Griswold versus Connecticut, the court ruled in 1965 that married couples have the right to access contraceptives. The Supreme Court had no right to even step in on that question. And that's what truly the Constitution says. But yet it ruled anyways. 2003, the court said that Lawrence versus Texas, the state could not outlaw consensual gay sex. Well, first of all, that is not a Supreme Court's decision. That is a state's decision given to the power of the Constitution. And the courts in 2015, decision of Arbfellow versus Hodge, establishes a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. But none of these follow the same criteria that was outlined within the constitutional justice. And it's really unclear how far, whether they're willing to go back and how far the courts and most senior members depend on this. The major opinion, the reason applied for abortion and rejected any other assertions rationale to Dobbs could extend to Griswold, Lawrence, and Oddfellow. There's no question about that. Those three cases all fall within the same predicament. And it's true. The Supreme Court should have never made those decisions because they were not constitutionally empowered to. That's why Roe versus Wade ended up getting overturned. We got protests going on around the country because of this, but it's true. For too long, the constitutional rights have been under threat. And this is one threat or another. I mean, we've been watching it happen over years, not just recently. And it is sad to say. Fortunately, it's one thing after another. And Biden's alarming tweet with his cryptic comment, "Here we go again with a second pandemic." It's a lot of questions coming forward during his presidential remarks on the COVID-19 vaccine for children 5 and under. President Joe Biden alarmed Twitter users, and when he spoke of government preparing for a second pandemic. What could that be? I don't know. Monkeypox is mutating at an unprecedented rate right now, accelerating its evolution. Meanwhile, we have UK dealing with the 2 new variants. Total of 1,739 people tested positive for the virus this past week alone in the UK. So that's almost 2 million people positive for the virus in the UK right now. Monkeypox and that, a second pandemic really looks evident of what they're going to push as a pandemic. So that. It's sad, though, knowing that this president really truly does not care about the people, knowing what's happening, including issues that aren't being talked about, like the monkeypox mutations and the lack of utilization of the vaccine we already have for monkeypox that's already safe, not being used at this moment. Of course, now New York City, because Biden has not issued a resupply or issued an emergency supply of vaccines for monkeypox, cities are running out of vaccines. Cities are running out of vaccines even for COVID. I mean, this is getting crazy. Health officials are scrambling to ramp up testing amidst the increased demand. Just one thing after another. Researchers have now discovered around 50 different genetic variations in the virus, and they figure 6 to 12 times higher than previously studied of other orthopox viruses. This is a big, big problem. And where did this come from? We can claim we know. Claim it's from natural things, but viruses do not evolve at this rate. Yeah, typhoid fever. There's an antibiotic resistance. Typhoid fever coming right now. It's just another thing to push. Yeah, Susan, that's another question. Hospitalizations are still at all-time highs. Hospitals are still having problems getting patients in. If you guys don't know that, that's national headlines everywhere. When we look at UK, just COVID cases, I mean, it's ridiculous. This is 2 things happening at the same time, and both ones are being covered up by the government because if we talk about it too much, then people will know that Biden did nothing to fix it. Let's be honest. If Biden didn't fix it, then what did he do? That's the big question. What benefits has Biden brought to the United States in the American public. I haven't seen many. I mean, the figures and numbers are going up 75% from 2 weeks prior. 75% increase in cases is a big jump. It's sad. The uptake, of course, it's going to happen everywhere. The variants are already here in the U.S. and are likely to become dominant soon amongst all countries. But if you don't talk about it, it didn't happen. Of course, federal government also moved to ban Juuls, of course, vape nicotine. Now, this is a puzzling as the FDA has officially banned Juuls e-cigarettes from the U.S. market, while the FDA is also legalizing marijuana and other drugs. It's ridiculous watching what's happening. Now Biden is talking about removing nicotine from cigarettes. But yet, legalizing marijuana and mushrooms and everything else in other parts of the country is happening at a record rate. We're literally on the verge of legalizing marijuana across the whole United States. When alcohol is a much more dangerous drug than cigarettes or most of these other drugs because it does affect other people's lives. We're not concerned about that. We're banning Juuls because that's what Biden wants to do. And the biggest problem with this is going to be children, of course, because children have weed is safer. I know, Rodney, I'm not getting into that conversation, but I'm just saying the ridiculousness of this is just ridiculous. Families are going to have to do crazy things to try to keep their children away from nicotine. Okay, we're not going to lot to talk about what's coming next, but I got to get through the news today. But families, of course, what are you going to do when your child's addicted to nicotine? You didn't know it. They were using a Juul at school. And now, of course, these vape devices that children have been addicted to for so long, children are going to move on to harder drugs. And this is a scary situation moving forward. It could lead to much worse addictions and problems in the future. And the fears that parents and doctors have of this is a real fear. Nicotine is a very hard substance for addiction. To beat that addiction, a lot of people turn to other things. But another big problem. Yeah, Glenda, but the vape movement he's coming after all vapes eventually. That's the problem. Juuls is the first one they attack directly on the market. But watching the economy fall is crazy. And something that happened today that happens before every recession in the last 100 years, copper has entered a bear market, which is the strongest indicator now that we have that a recession is coming or already here. Like I've already claimed, we're in a recession. That's not a question. We're in a recession. The metals, which the economic barometrics fell 24% from its peak Friday. 24% copper has fallen. Yet we're not in a recession according to our government. The risk of a recession is gathering pace, and the increased rate hikes and inflation choking global growth is happening everywhere. In Europe, of course, they're suffering the biggest and the worst for everyone. But this is just coming around to everybody in due time. European workers are bracing for tough times as real wages fall. Amongst food shortages and everything else that's happening there, Europeans are seeing real wages fall faster than the U.S. Counterparts and Russia, as inflation is on a fresh surge there, threatening to push and continuance into the recession and push to a deep recession, maybe a depression. Yeah, people here should be stocking up on everything. It should be stocked up on everything. Let's be honest. Of course, Bill Gates, Attorney General, intervenes after Bill Gates buys a massive amount of new farmland in North Dakota, trying to buy 2,100 acres. The Attorney General's office in North Dakota sent a letter asking that the trust that Bill Gates owns to prove the company's use of land does not violate the farming corporate farming laws. Because we know what he's been doing with land. Bill Gates has been buying land and not using it at all, so not actually producing any crops. And a lot of people are giving an earful. From neighbors to agricultural commissioners, these people are upset. People can't just live. They're not stupid. They're not spectators at this point. They see what's happening. There has to be limits on these trusts that are made by these rich and powerful people controlling farmlands and ranch lands. As Bill Gates tried to acquire 6 parcels of land, he's limiting his liability because he owns it under a trust, which allows certain exemptions, basically allowing to bypass the land for its actual purposes. It's ridiculous. And it's an ongoing problem. This isn't the first person that's getting caught for it. But Bill Gates is the largest owner of farmland in the U.S., owning 242,000 acres across 18 states. That's as of January 2021. Who knows how much he owns now? That might be as well as 342. It's a lot of records to go through to get the numbers. But of course, the violations just alone on him trying to buy this land for each property is a fine of $100,000. But how much do people have to look up and say, hey, there's a problem here? People are buying up land and not using it. Of course, the Supreme Court allows, finally, the major victory for gun rights groups, allows carrying of firearms in public. Major victory. This ruling expanded on the 2008 decision of the Second Amendment safeguards a person's right to possess a firearm at their home for self-protection. The Supreme Court ruled this yesterday. The Constitution provides the right to carry guns outside of the home, issuing a major decision, meaning of Second Amendment. I mean, the 6-3 ruling, the court's second important decision on the right to keep and bear arms in the landmark 2008 case. The first time the amendment safeguards a person's right to possess a firearm, although the decision was limited to keep guns at home for self-defense. Now, this new decision opens up a huge new thing, especially in states like New York and several other states, that you have to have a special permit to even get a gun, much less carry it concealed or public open. The court now taking the next steps to apply Second Amendment beyond the limits of home or property will affect the ability of states and local governments opposing wide varieties of firearm regulations that we've seen everywhere. Petition came, of course, today as Congress advanced its most significant gun violence prevention legislation in almost 30 years. A New York law, of course, that required showing special needs to get a permit to carry a concealed handgun in public, is now gone. It can't exist. There's a lot of stuff going on. The states that ban carrying handguns openly allow its residents to apply for a license to carry them concealed. That's also up for issue right now. The law at issue says, however, the permits could be granted only to applicants who demonstrate a special need, a requirement that went beyond a general desire for self-protection, which is against the Constitution, as we all know. Of course, the gun safety bill that got passed through the House and the Senate is ridiculous as it goes up further. The Biden's hands that approved a 65-33 vote. And what it's actually going to do, I mean, question is, criminals aren't going to follow any kind of gun restriction or law. But the bill, basically, and its most important restriction of gun ownership would tighten background checks. There would be a gun purchase convicted of a domestic violence or significant crime as a juvenile would not be allowed. Of course, Democrats and Republicans did not get along on banning assault weapons, which wasn't going to happen. The U.S., of course, saying we're not going to be involved in Taiwan, defending Taiwan if China gets involved, and the U.S. conducting Taiwan straight flyovers amidst Chinese tension. And that's not the only place China is ready to go out with. China and Russia are both, of course, in Japan's water space, or in Japan's territorial waters. Japan says the Chinese Coast Guard ships in its longest violation of the territorial waters in decades. China's vessels entered the Japanese water eastbound in the early hours of Tuesday and remained to be a Japanese fishing boat was operating in the area. I mean, they've been there since they're supposedly exiting Thursday afternoon or evening, but they're still there. Japanese Coast Guard sent out its own patrol ship to the area and demanding the Chinese vessel leave immediately of Japanese territorial waters. But no word has come back from that. It is sad because most of this looks like a cover for something much bigger coming. And I know you guys are interested in what I'm talking about now. What's going to happen this coming weekend, this coming American holiday? Not this weekend, but next weekend we enter the 4th of July weekend, when Americans spend the most on food and gas, two things that we're at a shortage of. Those shortages, of course, are increasing prices, but when Americans actually go up and fill their cars for the first time in months, instead of just buying the absolute necessary gas they need to get back and forth, what'll happen? It's just one thing after another. I mean, shortage of meat is obviously going to be prevalent coming through everything that's happened. I mean, watching what's been going on just recently is disastrous. I think people will really start to set in when hyperinflation does take place. I expect hyperinflation prices to go way up. There's several economists that are right with me on the same issue coming 4th of July weekend, as people do buy for the barbecues and buy more meat than they bought in most months prior. And of course, buy fuel to go and see fireworks and celebrate this country's winning of an amazing war. It's crazy. Where are we going to end up? What is going to happen next? Because this is happening. When people start buying massive amounts of products, which they're going to have to do, yeah, bug processing plant, because they're going to try to feed us bugs because they can't get food. Yeah, well, it's 4th of July is a tipping point. It's one of them. It's America's second biggest holiday besides Christmas and spending and travel. And those are two big things that are a problem right now. People buying more food, more fuel than we actually produce. Biden talking about his 13 million barrels a day when we consume over 19 to 21 million barrels a day. 13 million barrels does not meet our quota, whether he wants to try to admit it or not. Blaming it on big oil is not going to work either. We won't allow new refineries when most refineries, of course, are operating right now at a 75 to 95% occupant or running rate. And the 75% rates is because temperatures are too high to run any faster than that. You can't produce oil if you can't condense the fuel. That's energy or lack of efficiency in energy. That's a big issue. Yeah, there's protests going on all over the country right now. And it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous every time I look. But I'm going to pull up some protests here and let you see what's going on. But it's going to be quite hectic. Everything is going on right now from DC to Seattle to everywhere else. I'll be back live with protests in just a minute. I'm going to sign off of here and rechange the title so people know what we're covering. But we are knee deep in hell, and it's going to just keep getting deeper. Get your waders on because you're going to need to be walking through some deep shit soon. That's all I can say. God bless you guys, and I'll see you guys in a minute when I start live covering protests. Good night, and God bless.